Hey guys, get ready for a story that will leave you breathless. Ingrid Rounceville, a dedicated and beloved woman, was brutally murdered in a shocking and mysterious crime. Today, we will explore every disturbing detail of this tragedy and what led someone to commit such cruelty. Stay with us and discover the dark secrets behind this case. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more real and emotional stories. Let's go. It was an ordinary Friday, April 8, 2016, but for Ingrid, this date marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. After a month of expectant conversations on social media, she finally decided to take a leap of faith. Ingrid had met a man through Tinder, one of those dating apps that promise magical connections. With her heart divided between anxiety and hope, she decided to give the possibility of moving on, of starting over, a chance. After all, after so many disappointments, perhaps it was time to find a little happiness. That day, Ingrid prepared herself carefully. She put on an outfit that made her feel confident and beautiful, straightened her hair, put on a light lipstick, and lightly perfumed herself. Before leaving, she made sure to drop off her precious daughters at her ex-husband Philip's house. Despite everything, Philip had always been a devoted father, and she knew the girls would be safe with him. With a smile on her face and a promise in her heart, she told them she would be back the next morning to spend the day together. The evening promised to be special. Ingrid and her new boyfriend decided to watch a Seattle Mariners baseball game, one of the city's most popular teams. For Ingrid, who wasn't exactly a fan of the sport, the game represented more than just a game. It was an opportunity to disconnect from her worries, to live in the moment, and to allow herself to feel joy again. The energy in the stadium was contagious, the lights shone brightly, and the sound of the fans cheering for every play filled the air. Ingrid found herself smiling, cheering, and for the first time in a long time, she felt that life could, indeed, be good again. After the game, with their hearts still racing with excitement, they decided to extend the night. They went to a bar where her boyfriend's sister worked. It was a cozy place, with low lights and soft music in the background, perfect for relaxing and enjoying each other's company. Between one game of darts and another, they laughed, toasted, and chatted as if they were old friends. Ingrid felt light, as if a big dark cloud that had been hanging over her life was finally dissipating. But, like in a suspense film, the feeling of joy and freedom that Ingrid was experiencing that night would be brutally interrupted. The next morning, April 9th, Philip arrived at Ingrid's house with his daughters, as they had agreed. It was around 10 o'clock, and the sun was already shining in the sky, announcing a beautiful day. However, as he approached the house, something bothered him. Ingrid's silver Toyota Glander, always parked in front of the house, was missing. This sparked a sense of concern in Philip, who knocked on the door several times but got no answer. He called her name, looked out the windows, but everything seemed empty. Strangely empty. Philip then picked up the phone and called Ingrid. He called once, twice, 3 times, but nothing. Ingrid didn't answer, which was completely unusual. She was a devoted mother, always true to her promises, especially when it came to her daughters. With each unanswered call, the feeling that something was terribly wrong grew in Philip's chest. Desperate for information, Philip called Jorga, Ingrid's mother. If anyone would know where she was, it would be her mother. However, when Jorga answered the phone and heard that Ingrid was not home and had not returned his calls, a wave of panic ran through his body. She knew her daughter better than anyone and knew that Ingrid would never leave her daughters waiting without an explanation. Fear began to take hold of Jorga, and without hesitation, she grabbed her house keys and went straight to Ingrid's house. Jorga arrived as quickly as she could, her heart beating wildly. With trembling hands, she unlocked the door and entered the house, calling Ingrid's name. But the house was eerily silent. She climbed the stairs with a terrible sense of foreboding, each step seeming to echo her daughter's absence. When she entered Ingrid's room, the scene she found alarmed her even more. Ingrid's purse was on the table, next to her phone. It didn't make sense. If she had gone out, she wouldn't have left behind the most essential items. Who leaves without money, without documents, without their phone? That scene only raised more questions than answers, and the worst of all was the emptiness that echoed through the house. Jorga knew, deep down in her heart, that something terrible had happened. Wasting no time, Jorga called the police, reporting that her daughter was missing, as was her car. When officers from the Renton Police Department arrived at Ingrid's home, they found Jorga distraught, tears streaming down her face as she tried to explain what had happened. The officers, trying to calm her down, suggested that perhaps Ingrid had gone out and would return soon. But Jorga could not accept such a simplistic explanation. She knew her daughter. Something was deeply wrong, and she begged the police to investigate her disappearance thoroughly. What could have happened to Ingrid that night? Was she in an accident? Or something worse? The questions plagued the minds of all who loved her as the mystery of her disappearance began to unfold. Today, I invite you to delve into this disturbing case. Let's explore every detail of this story together, in the hope of understanding what happened to Ingrid. But before we continue, leave your like on the video so you can continue receiving content like this. If you've already left your like, let's continue. This young mother of 3 girls, whose life was tragically cut short. The city of Renton, with its almost 107,000 inhabitants. Imagine a very old city, which started back in the 10th century. Today, this city is famous for being home to a large aircraft factory belonging to a company called B. It is located in the greater Seattle area, a huge place with over 4 million people, surrounded by the Pacific Ocean and Lake Washington, very close to the border with Canada. In addition, this area is known for being the birthplace of several giant technology companies, such as Microsoft, which was founded by Bill Gates, a local resident. And that's not all. Amazon, which everyone knows, was also born in Seattle, back in 1994. In the 90s and 2000s, many software, biotechnology and internet companies started there, making the region grow very quickly. Now, let's talk about Ingrid Reville, a person full of life and joy. She was born in Arizona on August 2, 1975. When Ingrid graduated from high school in Tucson, Arizona in 1993, she was a graduate of the University of Arizona. Her passion was caring for people, so she decided to pursue a career in nursing and graduated from the University of Arizona in 1997. After that, Ingrid moved to Washington State, where she began working as a nurse at the Swedish Medical Center in Seattle, helping many people with her work. Ingrid married a man named Philip Lynn, and together they had 3 lovely daughters, R, B, and N, but over time, their relationship began to struggle, and in 2014, they decided to divorce. Ingrid, brave as she was, left home and moved to Renton, Washington, with her daughters. She was ready to start a new life as a single mother, even though she knew it would be difficult. Raising her 3 daughters alone was not easy, but Ingrid loved them more than anything and was determined to do the best for them. In 2016, Ingrid was living in Renton with her girls, who were 6, 8, and 10 years old at the time. Despite the divorce, Ingrid and Philip remained in touch, because they wanted to be present in their daughters' lives. But the divorce affected Ingrid a lot. She felt alone and wanted to find someone who would help her face the challenges of everyday life, someone who would love and respect her. It was then that Ingrid, at age 40, met a man online through a dating site. They started talking, and these conversations made Ingrid feel less alone. She began to hope for better days, feeling beautiful and desired again. This new love didn't care at all that Ingrid had 3 daughters, and it made her feel like she was living a dream, starting a new chapter in her life. But suddenly, no one knew where Ingrid was. The police began investigating, going door to door, asking neighbors if they had seen Ingrid entering the house the night before or leaving in the morning. One neighbor told something quite intriguing. He saw Ingrid returning home the night before with a man he had never seen before. This man seemed suspicious because no one knew him, and what worried everyone was that no one saw Ingrid leave the house after that. So the big question was, who was this man? And if Ingrid entered the house, but no one saw her leave, where could she be? The police asked people to think about whether they had noticed anything strange the night before or that morning, and encouraged anyone who did to tell them. Ingrid's daughters became increasingly worried when they heard the police asking about their mother. They ran to Jorga, their grandmother, for answers, asking if something had happened to their mother. Jorga tried to calm them down, saying that Ingrid had gone out somewhere and would be back soon. The police had promised Jorga that they would investigate the disappearance of her daughter, Ingrid, but that did not ease her anguish. With every passing minute, Jorga's worry grew. She could barely sit still, pacing back and forth, wondering what could have happened to her daughter. Her heart was tight, and the feeling of helplessness was suffocating. Then a thought came to her like a bolt from the blue. She grabbed Ingrid's cell phone, hoping to find some clue, anything that might lead her to understand what had happened. With trembling hands, Jorga began to look at the last calls on Ingrid's cell phone. She noticed that there was a number that repeated itself several times. This number had called Ingrid several times, even on the day she disappeared. This lit a spark of hope in Jorga's heart, but it also made her apprehensive. Who could this person be? And why so many calls? Determined to find out more, Jorga took the number and typed it into Facebook. Her eyes widened when she saw the profile associated with the number. It was of a man named John Curtin. Her heart raced. Who was this man? What did he know about Ingrid? Wasting no time, Jorga decided to send a message to John. She was desperate, she needed answers. Her hands could barely type the words. Hi, my name is Jorga, Ingrid's mother. My daughter has gone missing, and I saw that you spoke recently. Do you know where she is? Please answer me. John's answer came quickly, but it brought more questions than answers. Hi, I'm John. I thought she was with her kids today. Jorga's heart sank. Didn't he know? How could he not know? Jorga, trying to remain calm, answered quickly. She told him that Ingrid was missing, that the last time she saw her was the night before, that all her belongings were at home but she wasn't. Her mind was racing, trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. John looked confused and answered, 911. What happened? We went to the Mariners game last night, but we didn't spend the night together because she said she had to pick up her kids. I don't know what she told you about me or our relationship. With each word John said, Jorga's heart sank further. It seemed that Ingrid really had gone out with John the night before, and he might be the last person to see her. Jorga felt a mixture of fear and hope. Maybe John knew where Ingrid was, maybe he could help. But then, suddenly, he stopped responding. Jorga continued to text frantically. Please, John, can you call me? I know your name is John Curtin, so please talk to me. Ingrid mentioned something about finding someone, but after that, we haven't been able to reach her. Her car isn't even here. We're desperate for any help. Ingrid would never abandon her family like that. But John didn't respond. Every minute of silence was torture for Jorga. She felt like she was trapped in a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. Tears began to fall, and she felt a sense of utter despair. As Jorga tried unsuccessfully to contact John, the afternoon passed slowly, filled with fear and uncertainty. Around 4 p.m., when Ingrid had been missing for more than 6 hours, the police received a call that changed the course of the investigation. The voice on the other end of the line was shaking with fear. A man named Mike Novio was in a state of complete panic. What I'm about to tell you is really bizarre, he began. I went to take out the trash, and in the trash can in front of my house, there were 3 white trash bags. When I went to take the bags out, something really scared me. I think I saw a foot. Mike lived about 10 miles from Ingrid's house in Seattle. He looked terrified, and could barely speak properly. When I opened the bags, he continued, I found what looked like parts of a human body. I saw a head, and red-painted fingernails. Mike stopped talking for a moment, trying to control the nausea he felt as he remembered the horrific scene he had encountered. It's all too much for me. I'm completely shocked. The police wasted no time in quickly arriving on the scene and taking immediate action. The officers, with a mixture of apprehension and caution, removed the trash bags from the trash can, not knowing exactly what they would find. Each movement was slow and precise, as if the weight of the discovery was already on his shoulders. As he opened the bags, the air seemed to thicken. Inside were pieces of a human body, a severed head, part of a leg, and an arm. The horror of the scene was almost indescribable. The images were difficult to process, and for a brief moment, the world around him seemed to stop. The body was not yet decomposed, and the features of the head were intact, as if death had just occurred. It was a disturbing sight, but necessary for the police to identify the victim. After a detailed examination, the confirmation was like a punch in the stomach. the head belonged to Ingrid, the woman who had been reported missing a few hours earlier. The revelation sent shock and sadness through everyone involved. But at the same time, a disturbing question began to arise in the minds of the detectives: why would the killer have chosen to abandon Ingrid's remains so close to her home, just 10 miles away, in a dumpster where they could easily be found? Was it an act of defiance? A cruel game to taunt the police? Or perhaps an attempt to send a dark message, hastening the discovery of the body? While these questions remained unanswered, Ingrid's body parts were sent for detailed forensic examination. The hope was that some clue, no matter how small, would help identify the killer. Every detail would be crucial to piecing together the macabre puzzle that was unfolding before them. Breaking the devastating news to Ingrid's family was a task that no police officer wanted to undertake, but it was inevitable. When Jorga, Ingrid's mother, received the news, the pain she felt was as if the ground had disappeared from beneath her feet. Her heart was broken, and the shock was so great that for a few moments she simply could not believe what she was hearing. The cruel reality that someone had done something so monstrous to her daughter left her in a state of absolute despair. Questions flooded her mind, each one more painful than the last. Why would someone do this to Ingrid? How would her granddaughters grow up without the love and affection of the mother they adored so much? The next day, April 10, 2016, Jorga, still in a state of shock, decided to try one last resort. She logged on to Facebook, hoping to finally hear back from John, the man Ingrid had been out with the night she disappeared. But the computer screen remained silent, with no new messages. John's silence was starting to look increasingly suspicious. With a heavy heart and not knowing what else to do, Jorga contacted the police and told them everything she knew about John and his possible involvement with Ingrid. The detectives realized that John could be the key to unraveling the mystery. If he was the last person to see Ingrid alive, he might have crucial information. They began trying to contact him, but their initial attempts were thwarted, as John did not answer any of their calls. Jorga's anguish grew with each passing second. Finally, that evening, John answered. To ensure that John did not try to escape, the police used a tactic. They told them that they needed to discuss Ingrid's disappearance and that they were closely monitoring his movements. They warned that if he did not cooperate, he would be arrested. Feeling the pressure, John agreed to go to the police department for questioning. The next day, April 11, 2016, John arrived at the department. He seemed calm, almost indifferent, which immediately raised the detective's suspicions. Before the questioning began, the officers searched him thoroughly to make sure he was not armed or carrying anything dangerous. The questioning began with simple but direct questions. "Where are you currently living?" one of the detectives asked. John answered without hesitation, but with an almost disinterested tone of voice, "I'm homeless. I'm living on the streets." The detectives continued, wanting to better understand the relationship between John and Ingrid. "We're looking to find out what happened to Ingrid. As you already know, she's missing," one of the detectives said, watching John's every micro-expression. "Yes, I know," John replied, still maintaining the same disturbing calm. "What was your relationship with her? Did you see each other often?" asked another detective, trying to break through John's emotional barrier. "Yes, I would say so," John replied, showing no emotion, as if he were talking about something trivial. John's calmness was unusual, especially considering the gravity of the situation. The detectives, intrigued, continued to probe deeper. They wanted to understand the dynamic between John and Ingrid, trying to find out if there was some ulterior motive that could have led John to hurt her. "Did she let you stay at her place or did you meet somewhere else?" one of the detectives asked, trying to find a chink in John's emotional armor. "Sometimes she let me stay at her place," John replied. "How often did you meet in the last few weeks?" the detective asked, noticing that John seemed to be answering automatically, almost as if he were reciting a rehearsed text. The detectives were increasingly certain that John knew more than he was letting on. John's coldness, his seeming indifference to the fact that his girlfriend had been brutally murdered, was alarming. They knew they had to find out what really happened the day Ingrid was last seen, April 8, 2016, and that John's answers held the key to unraveling this dark mystery. During the questioning, the detectives directed their questions at John with increasing curiosity. What is the last thing you remember about contact with Ingrid? They wanted to understand what happened before she disappeared. John, apparently uncomfortable, replied that he had texted Ingrid that morning. I knew she had plans to meet her daughters the next day. She always said she didn't want me to meet the girls. The detectives continued the questioning, trying to find out more details. When you went back to her house, what happened? Were you in the bedroom or somewhere else? John hesitated, giving a vague answer. I think we were in the bedroom. I'm not sure. That's usually what we did. At the end of the questioning, the detectives left the room, but the cameras continued to record John. Worryingly, he was seen rolling up his sweatshirt and making a makeshift pillow. John's apparent indifference to the gravity of the situation was disturbing. His behavior seemed completely oblivious to the seriousness of the case. In the meantime, the police still had no direct evidence linking John to Ingrid's death, so he was released, but the police decided to monitor his activities more closely, hoping to uncover new leads. Tensions mounted as the case unfolded and time passed. Over the next few days, the case evolved into a full-fledged murder investigation. Police obtained a search warrant for Ingrid's home and began to thoroughly examine every corner. What they found was shocking. Among the items found was a nearly empty box of white garbage bags, exactly like the ones that had been used to dispose of Ingrid's body parts in the trash. The search continued and, to their horror, investigators found a hacksaw in the bathroom. The hacksaw, covered in traces of blood and bone fragments, indicated that Ingrid had been brutally dismembered right there. Blood was also found in the bathtub drain, indicating that the crime had been committed with meticulous planning rather than an impulsive act. The situation became even more alarming when police received another call from a man named Michael Mullen. He had made a terrifying discovery in his trash can. Michael found a wrapped package containing a belly button piercing, and upon examination, the police confirmed that the piercing belonged to Ingrid. To make matters worse, a human leg was found at a recycling plant. The foot had the same painted toenails that Ingrid used to have, indicating that Ingrid's body parts had been scattered around, further complicating the investigation. The police began to suspect that the perpetrator was not a serial killer, who often tries to hide bodies in hard-to-find places. Instead, they considered the possibility that the perpetrator could be someone close to Ingrid. They decided to return to Ingrid's house to look for more evidence, and this time, they chose to remove the plumbing for a detailed inspection. The surprise came when they found more blood in the pipes. Using a special reagent, the investigators revealed traces of blood on the floor that had been carefully cleaned. This indicated that the crime was not just a sudden act of violence, but something meticulously planned. As test reports came in, disturbing details emerged. The coroner's closer examination revealed small blood vessels in Ingrid's eyes, a clear sign of strangulation. As the investigation deepened, police made increasingly disturbing discoveries about Ingrid's tragic fate. Analysis of the remains found revealed a clear and horrific picture. Ingrid had been strangled and then dismembered inside her own home. The evidence showed that, in addition to being strangled to death, she had been subjected to extreme torture before her body was dismantled, suggesting an act of violence motivated by deep, personal hatred. The toxicology report, a key piece of the investigation, revealed that Ingrid had no drugs in her system. However, her blood alcohol level was slightly elevated, indicating that she had consumed an unusual amount of alcohol. This may have played a role in her being more vulnerable on the night of the crime. On April 20, 2016, police made a crucial discovery. Ingrid's car was found in Belton, just 6 minutes from the Seattle stadium where she had gone to watch a game with John. It was unusual that the car had been abandoned so close to the scene, suggesting that the perpetrator had some connection to the area. Upon searching the vehicle, police found white garbage bags similar to the ones that had contained Ingrid's dismembered parts. In addition, 3 fingerprints were found on the driver's door handle. These prints were a key piece of evidence in the investigation, as they could directly link the car to Ingrid's disappearance. Laboratory tests confirmed that the fingerprints belonged to John Ton, the man Ingrid had been out with the night she disappeared. Confirming John's fingerprints on the car was a clear indication of his connection to the case. From this point on, it was clear that John was trying to mislead the police with his misleading statements. Despite initially claiming to be drunk and unaware of what had happened, the meticulous cleanup of the crime scene and detailed planning showed that John was aware of his actions at all times. To gain more information about John, detectives spoke with a friend of his, who provided important details about his behavior. She revealed that John, who worked as a day laborer, spent most of his nights at a shelter in Seattle, but occasionally stayed at her house. Interestingly, she mentioned that John was supposed to arrive on the morning of Saturday, April 9, 2016, the day after his meeting with Ingrid, but he showed up later than expected. When he arrived, he had a swollen and bruised lip. John claimed that he had been the victim of an attempted robbery at a bar, although he did not have his wallet. This detail raised police suspicions about the veracity of his story. During questioning of John, detectives noted injuries to his head, chin, and arms. These injuries were consistent with a heavy struggle and indicated that Ingrid had desperately tried to defend herself during the attack. The crime scene revealed a brutal struggle, with Ingrid fighting with all her might to save herself. Evidence of blood found in various locations in the house and signs of struggle reinforced the idea of a violent confrontation. Based on these findings, the police acted quickly and arrested John, formally charging him with Ingrid's murder. John Robert Ton, born in 1979, had a troubled criminal history. He had been convicted of assault in 1997 and had a history of reckless driving. In 2006, he was charged with attempted aggravated robbery in Utah, and in 2008, he was convicted of robbery. In addition, there were records of fights and conflicts in his life, which suggested a pattern of violent behavior. John Ton had a rather tumultuous past, which went beyond his legal troubles. In 2006, his parents, Hay and Joanne Ton, faced a terrifying situation with him. They were forced to seek legal protection because John had very aggressive behavior, especially when he was drunk. His parents were afraid for their own lives due to John's outbursts of anger, which often became even more intense when he was using alcohol or drugs. A particularly frightening incident occurred on March 2, 2006. That night, John, under the influence of alcohol, became extremely aggressive towards his parents. He took a disturbing movie called Hannibal, which is about a cannibal, and showed it to his mother in a threatening manner. John told her that she should watch the movie and be careful not to end up like the cannibal's victims. This act not only terrified his mother, but also left his parents deeply concerned for their own safety. Although they applied for a protective order, the request was denied, but these events showed that John had an alarming pattern of aggressive and unpredictable behavior. When Ingrid's case first came to light, John initially tried to distance himself from the crime, denying any involvement. However, he eventually changed his story and admitted his guilt. The prosecutor detailed the cruelty of his actions. John brutally murdered Ingrid in her own home. He strangled her and, after killing her, used a saw to dismember her body. With shocking coldness, John drove around downtown Seattle, disposing of Ingrid's body parts in various dumpsters throughout the city. John's defense tried to argue that there was insufficient forensic evidence to link their client to the crime and urged the community not to jump to conclusions. Despite these efforts by the defense, all the evidence gathered clearly pointed to John's guilt. Prosecutor Dan Terberg highlighted the meticulous work of the police and prosecutors, who gathered essential evidence to build a solid case against John. Terberg praised the dedication of the team, who faced significant challenges in gathering the necessary evidence and ensuring that John was held accountable for his actions. John was sentenced to 27 years and 9 months in prison. The judge presiding over the case in King County Superior Court expressed her frustration with the sentence, stating that if she had the power, she would have given John a life sentence. She described John's actions as extremely cruel and inhumane. During the trial, John addressed the court and Ingrid's family, attempting to express his remorse. He admitted that there were no words that could ease the pain he had caused and apologized sincerely. Philip Lynn, Ingrid's ex-husband, expressed the pain and loss that John had brought into their lives. He spoke of how John had not only taken Ingrid away, but also stolen the love and affection she had given to their daughters. Philip deeply regretted that his daughters would no longer have Ingrid's loving presence and maternal care. He also expressed sadness that his daughters would never again receive their mother's warm embrace and how future generations would never know the love of a maternal grandmother. Nancy, a close friend of Ingrid's, was devastated by the news. She described the ordeal as more than just an act of violence, it was complete and unimaginable destruction. Nancy called John a coward and made sure to highlight the devastating impact his actions had on the lives of Ingrid's daughters and everyone who loved Ingrid like a sister. Even though justice was served, the tragedy left deep and lasting scars. What do you think could have driven John to commit such a horrific crime? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe and stay tuned for more crimes we'll uncover.